The Dreams in the Witch House by H.P. Lovecraft. The Haunted Studies. Walter Gilman sat at his desk, the dim light of his lamp casting long shadows across the room that had once belonged to Keziah Mason, the infamous witch of Arkham. Books lay open before him, their pages filled with arcane symbols and mathematical equations that seemed to dance and twist before his eyes. These were not mere abstractions. They were the language of the universe, a syntax of reality that Keziah had somehow deciphered and left for him to unravel. Keziah knew something. Something about the fabric of reality, Walter muttered to himself, tracing his finger along the peculiar angles of the room. These walls, they're not just walls. They're a map to other dimensions. Keziah Mason, who had been tried for witchcraft in the 17th century, had escaped the gallows by vanishing from her jail cell, leaving behind rumors of secret knowledge and a room with strange, non-Euclidean angles. It was this very room where Walter now sat, surrounded by the legacy of a woman who had glimpsed the mechanisms behind the veil of reality. Just then, a scratching sound echoed from the corner of the room. Walter turned sharply, his heart racing. "Who's there?" he called out, but only silence answered. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the eerie feeling that had settled over him. "It's just the old house settling," he reassured himself. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him from the shadows. As he returned to his studies, the room seemed to grow colder, and the air felt charged with a strange energy. Walter's eyes grew heavy, and before he knew it, he had drifted into a restless sleep. In his dream, he found himself standing in a vast, otherworldly space, where the stars were wrong, and the geometry of the place defied all logic. A violet light pulsed in the distance, drawing him closer. The air was thick with the scent of ozone, and the ground beneath his feet felt like a spongy mass, undulating with the rhythm of an unseen heartbeat. "Walter," a voice hissed. Then he spun around to see an old woman, her eyes dark pits in her wrinkled face. Beside her stood a small, rat-like creature with sharp teeth and beady eyes that glinted in the strange light. "Keziah?" Walter gasped, taking a step back. "Yes, child," the old woman cackled. "And this is Brown Jenkin. We've been waiting for you." "But why? What do you want from me?" Walter stammered, his voice trembling. "You have the gift, Walter. The gift to see beyond the veil. To walk the paths that others dare not tread," Keziah said, her voice like the rustling of dead leaves. Walter felt a chill run down his spine. "I don't understand. I'm just a student, a mathematician." "Mathematics is the key, Walter. The key to unlocking the doors between worlds. But you must be willing to step through them," Keziah urged, extending a gnarled hand toward him. Walter hesitated, torn between fear and an insatiable curiosity. Memories of his childhood filled with dreams of other worlds and a yearning to understand the cosmos flooded his mind. "And if I do, what then?" "Then you will see the universe as it truly is. Vast, ancient of secrets waiting to be discovered," Keziah promised, her eyes gleaming. Walter took a deep breath, his mind racing. This was what he'd been searching for, wasn't it? The ultimate truth. With a determined nod, he reached out and took Keziah's hand. The violet light surged, engulfing them both, and Walter's scream echoed through the boundless void as he was pulled into the unknown. Back in the room, the lamp flickered and went out, leaving only darkness and the faint sound of tittering laughter. Walter Gilman's journey into the haunted studies had only just begun. The transition from wakefulness to sleep was seamless, as if the room itself had whispered him into slumber. The Witch's Legacy. Walter Gilman sat in his dimly lit room, the ancient tomes spread before him, whispering secrets of a world beyond. The walls, with their strange angles and cryptic designs, seemed to pulse with an unseen life. Keziah knew, he muttered to himself, tracing the lines of a complex diagram with his finger. She knew how to break the barriers of space to step through. Elwood, concerned by Walter's obsession, knocked softly on the door. "Walter, are you all right? You've been in here for hours." Walter looked up, his eyes reflecting a distant fire. "I'm on the verge of something, Elwood. Something monumental. The dreams you've been having, they're not normal, Walter. They're changing you," Elwood said as he stepped into the room, the air thick with the scent of old paper and dust. "They're enlightening me. Keziah's legacy is a gateway to power. To knowledge," Walter replied, shaking his head with a smile. Elwood glanced at the walls. "These symbols, they're part of her witchcraft." "Yes," Walter said, standing up. "They speak to me in my dreams. They show me places that can't exist, yet they do." "You need to rest, Walter. You're losing touch with what's real," Elwood reached out, placing a hand on Walter's shoulder. "What is real, Elwood? If these dreams are as tangible as the chair you're sitting on, then who's to say they're not real?" Walter's gaze was unyielding. "Just be careful, Walter. There's a thin line between genius and madness," Elwood sighed, knowing he couldn't sway his friend. Walter turned back to his books as Elwood left, the candlelight casting long shadows across the room. "Madness is just another word for enlightenment misunderstood, and I intend to understand everything." Walter's eyes then caught sight of an intricate object made of an unknown alloy. It was undoubtedly a key to the gates Keziah had opened centuries ago. He would follow her path, through dreams and reality, to unlock the secrets of the universe. The night grew darker, and as Walter drifted into sleep, the walls seemed to echo a deeper truth. Legacy. The knowledge passed through generations. In his dreams, Keziah Mason waited, ready to lead him through the gates of the unknown. The Eldrich Rat. In the dimly lit room of the witch house, Walter Gilman sat hunched over ancient tomes, his mind racing with forbidden knowledge. The musty air was thick with the scent of old paper and the faint, unsettling smell of decay. As he traced the arcane symbols with his finger, a chill ran down his spine, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. "Brown Jenkin," he whispered, the name of the malevolent familiar leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. Gilman's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he should resist, but the pull of the otherworldly was too strong. It was a sign, a dark omen that beckoned him towards a destiny he both feared and desired. "Walter, you need to stop this madness. It's consuming you." His friend Elwood's voice broke through his thoughts. Gilman looked up, his eyes wild and desperate. "I can't, Elwood. It's too late for me. The dreams, the visions, they're real. Listen to yourself, man. This isn't you talking. It's that thing, that creature that's been haunting your dreams." Elwood stepped forward, placing a hand on Gilman's shoulder. But Gilman shook his head, pulling away. "No, it's more than that. It's proof that the barriers between worlds can be broken." Gilman turned back to his books, his mind made up. He would face whatever came next, even if it meant stepping into the abyss. Elwood watched his friend with a heavy heart, knowing that he had lost him to the shadows. The tittering of Brown Jenkin echoed in his ears, a sinister lullaby for the descent into madness. Dreams and omens. Walter Gilman tossed and turned in his narrow bed, the ancient floorboards creaking under the strain of his restless movements. The room, steeped in the history of witchcraft and dark deeds, seemed to close in on him, the shadows dancing menacingly in the corners. "Elwood, Walter whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind that howled outside the small window. His friend, Elwood, sat in a chair beside the bed, his presence a grounding force against the occult influence that surrounded Walter. "It's just the wind," Elwood replied, his tone soothing yet firm. "Try to sleep." But sleep eluded Walter, replaced by vivid dreams where the old woman Keziah loomed over him, her eyes burning with malevolence. "Come, Walter," she beckoned. "The black man awaits, and the throne of Azathoth is but a step through the gate." Beside her, Brown Jenkin gnawed at the edges of reality, its sharp teeth bared in a sinister grin. "The child awaits your coming." Walter's heart raced as he struggled against the pull of the dream. "I won't," he gasped, overcome by fear. "I can't be part of this horror." Elwood reached out, his hand gripping Walter's shoulder. "You're not part of it. It's all in your mind. Fight it." The violet light in his dreams was irresistible, drawing him closer to the knowledge and power beyond the mortal coil. As reality blurred, Walter stood before the black man, otherworldly dimensions pulsating in his hand. "What do you seek, Walter Gilman?" the black man asked. "Knowledge," Walter replied, his voice steady. "The knowledge of the ages." "And what will you give?" the black man probed, his eyes gleaming. "Anything," Walter breathed. The chant rose around him, the air filled with the scratching and gnawing of unseen creatures. Walter felt himself slipping into the abyss, sanity and madness indistinguishable. Then a scream pierced the night and Walter awoke, Elwood's concerned face above him. "It was just a dream," Elwood reassured. "You're safe here with me." But Walter knew the omens in his dreams were real, and the culmination of his fears was imminent. There was no turning back. The ritual's beckoning. As Walter Gilman prepared for the ritual, the room was steeped in shadows. He focused on the object before him, an exotic figure with a ridged, barrel-shaped center and thin arms radiating outwards, ending in knobs and flat, starfish-like extensions. The material of the object, an iridescent gray veined with green, seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. "Focus, Walter," came the whisper from Keziah Mason, her figure emerging from the darkness, her eyes reflecting a deep knowledge. Brown Jenkin, her rat-like familiar, watched him intently. "What must I do?" Walter asked, gripping a light metal bowl. Keziah's voice echoed in the space. "The gateway needs the essence of the living to open." Walter placed the bowl on a marked spot on the floor, noticing the intricate symbols etched around it. "Now the chant," Keziah instructed. Walter repeated the alien words, feeling the room's atmosphere respond to the rhythm of his voice. "Is this right?" he asked, seeking affirmation from Keziah and Brown Jenkin. "You are doing as must be done," Keziah confirmed, guiding his stance. "Now, the knife." Walter felt the cold handle of the ornate knife. "But what am I to do with this?" he questioned. "A drop of blood to seal your intent," Keziah replied simply. Hesitation gripped Walter, but Keziah's stern voice urged him on. He pierced his finger, a drop of blood falling into the bowl, causing a flare of light and a gust of wind. "Now, join the circle, and the path will open," Keziah commanded. Walter stepped into the circle, the air vibrating around him, the ground seeming to fall away. He heard Brown Jenkin's fading titter and Keziah's final words, "Welcome to the beyond, Walter." He had stepped into a realm unknown, far beyond his haunted studies in Arkham. The sacrificial mistake. Walter Gilman's room was shrouded in shadows, the only light coming from a flickering candle that cast grotesque shapes on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of ancient incense, and the floor was littered with strange symbols drawn in chalk and ash. "Elwood, these dreams are consuming me," Walter whispered, his voice trembling. His friend Frank Elwood stood by the door, his face etched with concern. "Walter, you need to stop this. It's all in your head." The dreams had been so vivid that Walter couldn't distinguish them from reality anymore. He had seen things, terrible, dark things that he couldn't unsee. As he began the ritual, the words of the ancient text seemed to echo around the room. The light metal bowl before him was filled with an unknown liquid, and beside it lay a ceremonial knife and a crucifix for protection. Suddenly the room grew colder. Walter turned, clutching the crucifix. "You're not real." A small child, no more than 2 years old, with fear-filled eyes, tugged at his sleeve. "Please, mister, help me," the child whimpered. Walter's heart raced. This was the child that had been taken. He had to save the child, he had to. But it was too late. The child's wrist was bitten. The bowl that had been empty was now full, and the child lay still and lifeless on the ground. "No, no, no!" Walter fell to his knees. "What have I done?" Elwood rushed in. "Walter, what happened?" Walter could only stare at the small, still body, the horror of what had occurred crashing down upon him. The ritual, it had all led to this moment, this terrible, irreversible mistake. And as the spectral sounds of the workers outside filled the air, Walter knew that he had crossed a line from which there was no return. The world of his nightmares had bled into reality, and he was lost in the darkness, with no way back. The tittering shadows. The night air was thick with the whispers of the past as Walter Gilman lay in his narrow bed. He could hear the faint scratching of rats behind the plaster, a sound that had become all too familiar, yet no less unsettling. "Elwood," Gilman whispered, calling out to his friend who had taken to sleeping in the same room, hoping to ward off the nightmares that plagued them both. "Do you hear it?" Elwood, half asleep, murmured a response. "It's just the house settling, Walter. Go back to sleep." But sleep was a stranger to Gilman now. As he lay there, the line between waking and dreaming blurred. The spectral sounds grew louder, a cacophony of otherworldly whispers and cries that filled the room. Gilman wanted to scream, to run, but his feet were rooted to the spot. The next morning, the workers spoke in hushed tones about the sounds that had filled the night. It was like the house itself was alive, one said, his eyes wide with fear. Gilman said nothing, but inside he was screaming. The realms he had touched in his dreams were now a part of him, and he was a part of them, forever entwined in a dance of madness and despair. The Descent. In the dimly lit corner of the Miskatonic University Library, Walter Gilman pored over ancient tomes, his mind racing with the implications of the sacrificial mistake. The air was thick with the musty scent of old books, a stark contrast to the oppressive gloom of his room. As he traced the cryptic symbols with a trembling finger, a shadow loomed over him. Dr. Armitage, the university's historian and occult expert, peered down with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Walter, you tread on dangerous ground," Dr. Armitage warned, his voice a low rumble. "The path you've chosen is fraught with peril far beyond what you've encountered." Walter's eyes, haunted by sleepless nights, met the doctor's. "I know, but I can't turn back now. The sacrificial mistake, it's consuming me." Dr. Armitage nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of knowledge. "Then let me offer you some insight," he said, pulling out a weathered map. "This is not just about you or the child that vanished. It's bigger, Walter. It's a cosmic imbalance that you've unwittingly become a part of." As Walter absorbed the historian's words, his mind slipped into a dream, a memory of the first time he encountered the supernatural. He was younger, braver, and ignorant of the world's hidden horrors. In his dream, he stood before an ancient altar, the air crackling with forbidden energy. The ritual went awry, and a chasm to another dimension cracked open, releasing something unspeakable. Waking with a start, Walter realized the gravity of his mistake. The community's reaction was a blend of skepticism and fear, whispers of the occult mingling with the laughter of those who refused to believe. But Walter knew the truth. The sacrificial mistake had set something in motion that could not be undone, and it was only a matter of time before the world would have to face the consequences of his actions.